welcome to the Northwest preview of the NUIC 2017 season. Shane, we're here tonight to cover the Northwest preview. Last week we did our Upstate Conference preview. Here's some interesting facts I just want to share real quick with you. One, do you think that the NUIC has a legitimate shot to have another state champion in 2017?
Absolutely, I do. I think there's a couple teams that could actually get to that level. Obviously, you have Forreston coming back off their 2016 title. Lena Winslow's got tradition, Dakota, EPC, a lot of competition. Every year gives you a chance to win a title.
Now, here's some interesting facts about what you just said. So in 2006, when the NUIC split the divisions to the Northwest and the Upstate conferences, separating big schools and small schools, only 4 teams have won the Northwest division, and that is the 4 teams that you mentioned, Dakota, Lena Winslow, Forreston, and Dakota. Now, coincidentally, all 4 of them schools have gone on to win state titles, with 3 of them winning multiple titles in Dakota, Forreston, and Lena Winslow. And then if you look at the last 7 seasons alone, the Northwest Division has put out 6 state champions.
Right.
So
success speaks for itself with that.
It's pretty impressive what the Northwest side of the conference has done. I mean, we said it at the end of last season. The NUIC has won 11 state titles in the last 14 seasons, placing 13 teams in the state finals in that same time frame. Right. The only runner-ups being both by Stockton in 04 and 12. So the NUIC is definitely geared to have another big season, and like you said, there's a lot of teams gunning for Forreston being the defending state champs. All right, we're talking about the Du-Pec Rivermen. Last year, Durand went 0-9 in the Upstate Conference, 0-8 in the Upstate Conference, 0-9 overall. Pectonka also went 0-8 in the Northwest Conference, 0-9 overall. This year, Shane, they come together under the Du-Pec Rivermen name. With the new head coach and Tyler Hoffman taking over, what do you think the outlook on Du-Pec is going to be for this season?
Well, they obviously have some athletes when you combine 2 schools together. Not a lot of success, but with any co-op, that takes a little bit of time to get to form together. You look at Pectonka last year, they had a couple close losses against Galena and Amboy. Obviously, Durand's season spoke for itself, but anytime you get to start something together fresh, kids are going to be more motivated, feel like they have a chance, and that goes a long way. Confidence, and obviously, Tyler Hoffman is a great addition as he's coached at the lower levels of the co-op that's already been formed, so he knows the kids, kind of has a feel for what they should be doing. So I think there's some pieces in place that could definitely help bring Du-Pec around the corner that they've been struggling to get at for so many years.
Now, here's one of the things. They have a lot of controversy surrounding them starting off the season, with controversy over their mascot, what their colors were going to be, the overall co-op in general. How do you think that's going to play out for the Rivermen?
Well, it could either be beneficial or it could hurt the team. Obviously, this isn't the only co-op in the conference. We saw many years where EPC had great teams, but kind of outside voices might have prevented the team from winning. And you kind of get a feel as things were coming together for this co-op, it was kind of the same thing. Now, if the kids buy into the system and block out the noise, it really doesn't matter.
I agree. And speaking of kids, and you already mentioned it, they got a lot of kids returning between both Pectonka and Durand. And one of the big ones is going to be Mav Seaton. He's a returning running back and linebacker. He didn't put up a lot of numbers last year. He only had 48 attempts for 148 yards with a touchdown and garnered 2 receptions for 38 yards. But at that linebacker position, he actually led Pectonka in interceptions last year. And he's going to be a force to reckon with this year, as he's already put on more weight. He's grown a few more inches already this season. And then you got other guys as well. Griffin Mulcahy playing that fullback position, then on defense playing a linebacker or defensive end position. Some guys that you're looking at, you got your returning quarterback from Pectonka and Ryan Veal. Granted, his season was a little bit hard last year, only going 7 for 43 as far as completions to attempts. But Other guys that are going to play some big roles are going to be Caden Manning, also another running back, linebacker from Durand. Ryan McLean, also from Durand, another running back and linebacker. Stephen Conroy from Durand on the offensive and defensive lines. And then they have other guys like Jake McGrew and Matt North, all on the offensive line. So they got a lot of good kids coming back from both schools that should give them much needed depth from what they both had last season, along with some skill positions that they really need too.
Right. You bring a lot of talent back, but one of the big things that sticks out to me is, more important than that, is the new coach. I mean, I've said how he coached the lower levels, but I think it was really vital to this co-op that they didn't take the coach from Durand or from Peck that was there last year. I mean, it's a fresh beginning, so kids have a chance to learn together, whereas you don't have half the kids that already know the system and bringing in the other half.
Yeah, and I can see that being a great thing for Du-Pec as they move forward into the 2017 season. All these kids already know the system that Coach Hoffman has. They're going to have some familiar faces with some coaches like Dennis Schwab, who was the head coach at Durand prior, will still be there as an assistant coach. So they have familiarity. They have respect for the coaches. And I think that Du-Pec could surprise some people this year.
I agree. And we'll find out pretty fast what Du-Pec is and what they'll be with looking at their schedule. They start out with Forreston and West Carroll and EPC and Amboy and Dakota. I mean, that's pretty
games.
Tough right off the bat. So.
Okay, so we're heading to Galena, home of the Pirates. Last year, Galena went 2-7 overall, and they were 1-7 in the NUIC Northwest, culminating in their worst season since 1975. Galena has missed the playoffs 4 times since 1985, but will this be the year they missed the playoffs in back-to-back years for the first time since in 33 years?
Well, there's a lot to discuss before we get to the prediction part, but I think if you can make a case for either way. You and I kind of have a differing opinions of Galena, which is always welcome, though. Different pages is always nice for this. You look at Galena and you kind of have to wonder what has gone on there the last few years. They've had a lot of talent. Last year they were preseason #1. Like you said, went 2-7. Played a good ball game at the end of the year, but all 9 games count. You know, a lot remains to be seen on Galena. It's almost, in my opinion, I have to see them stack some wins on before I start believing in that team again.
Yeah, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the Pirates the last couple of years, and some people have started to question whether Coach Freed should be there or not, but that's not for us to say.
Right.
What I can tell from Coach Freed is he's got 2 state titles under his belt in his time there. He's done a good job as far as basically keeping the pedigree of Galena to the level that we've always known it to be at. But you do look at their schedule, and they start off on the road at Dakota. A same team that they ended the season with last year and basically gave Dakota everything that they wanted and more, and Dakota escaped with a 2-point win to make the playoffs. But then you follow that up with the second week game against East Dubuque, which is a big rivalry game, only 7 miles down the road from each other. And East Dubuque beat Galena last year as well. So you follow that up then, weeks 4 and 5, they have Lena Winslow and West Carroll. So 4 of their first 5 games of the year are going to be very tough. And then in between there, in week 3, they're playing River Ridge, which we said last week. We expect to see some improvements out of River Ridge as they're going to be a junior-dominated team that has played at the varsity level the last 2 years as freshmen and sophomores.
Right, and like we've said pretty much every video that we've done, if you are kind of in the middle on where your team is, that 4 and 5, 5 and 4, you're kind of in the wrong conference because every week is a tough opponent. You can't really look at the schedule and pick out wins. I mean, in past, or if you're on the upstate side of the conference, you can do that more than with the Northwest. The Northwest is stacked.
It is, and I mean, in all honesty, we were talking about the NUIC Northwest winning 6 titles in the last 7 years. Well, the last time the upstate side of the conference won a state title was Galena in 2007 when they were on the small side of the conference. So, you know, that's been a long time since the upstate, outside of Stockton getting there in 12, but it's been a while since the upstate side has seen a champion come out of it. Everybody around the state knows that the northwest side of the conference is the premier part of the conference. I hate to say it, and I don't mean to offend the upstate side and their fans, but it's just, the stats say it.
It's the way it is.
I mean, there's proof in the writing right there.
And part of that, some people can pick apart with enrollments and, you know, you're at an unfair advantage, but...
Right. It's not an unfair advantage. The majority of the NUIC now is all 1A teams anymore, so you got to play each other anyway.
Right.
So look at some of the key returners that Galena has coming back. It's going to be quarterback, defensive back Mickey Laurento. He threw for 550 yards last year, completing 50% of his passes, going 45 for 90 with 5 touchdowns, and then he had another 19 attempts for 9 yards rushing. A guy I look to be the leader of the team is Colton Bauer. He'll be back in his running back and defensive back positions. He ran for 534 yards last year, going for 4 touchdowns, and he added on another 103 yards receiving. And then you got other guys like Connor Einsweiler, Cameron Jelinas, Ryan Bussin, Nick Wand, Hunter Wasmond, and then you got guys like Raul Garcia and Chris Knauts, which are guys that you expect to see come up and play some big-time minutes and hopefully get Galena back on track to where they were. The Amboy Clippers came in last year out of the track conference with high hopes set on their inaugural season in the NUIC. Unfortunately, they saw their ship sink, and they went 3-6 and 3-5 overall in the NUIC Northwest. Shane, will we see the Clippers make some magic happen and get them back into the playoffs?
Well, I think it's going to be tough. If you don't have a good team, it's hard to get wins in the Northwest. Obviously, we learned that last year with Amboy. We thought they were going to be better than what they were.
Right.
The first week, last year, they played Galena tough, and that was kind of a gauge for what we thought because Galena was preseason number 1. Played them close, and then the wheels kind of fell off. I don't know if Amboy really has enough going on to get themselves back into a competitive level.
I agree. And I mean, you look at like the start of their schedule, they open up with Milledgeville, followed by EPC and West Carroll. And then at the back end of the schedule, weeks 6 and 7, they have Lena, Winslow, and Dakota, and then they end with Forreston, in Forreston. So, the Amboy's got a tough road ahead of them. I just don't see, even despite their success, I mean, their coach has been there for quite a few years, since 1994. He's had a lot of success in Amboy. But, I mean, you look at some of their top returners. I mean, Ben Ryan, running back, linebacker, he should be pretty good. I don't have any stats on him. But I know that he played a lot. He started last year for Amboy as a junior. You got Kyle Hunter coming back. He was an honorable mention all-conference offensive lineman. So he's coming back both offensive and defensive lines. And then you got Justin Hart at quarterback, which he'll be new to that role at the varsity level this year. You got Victor Gutierrez coming back at offensive line and linebacker. And then you got some other guys like Reese Vason and Luke Shaver. But outside of that, there's not a whole lot coming back for the Clippers this year that had significant amount of playing time last year because they were senior dominated.
Right. And a lot of the successful teams either have a lot coming up or a lot coming back. When you don't have a lot coming back or coming up for impact players like that, it's obviously tough to do. And I think Amboy was shown a tough lesson last year. You know, you come into the NUIC, you think that you might have a little more success. Obviously, coming from track, you know, where you're playing in bigger schools, you think you get into a smaller conference, and well, your enrollment puts you in the hard side of the NUIC, and wins are hard to come by.
It is. I mean, they really got an NUIC wake-up call when they went into the Northwest Division last year. They did not know what to expect. I mean, Heck, they had their own local newspaper pick them to go 8-1 last year behind Forreston at 9-0.
Right.
So it shows you how arrogant or cocky that they
or uninformed. I mean,
thought they might
right.
be. Either way, you know, they know what the NUIC is about this year. But as far as what they do have coming back, I don't know if it's enough to make noise in the NUIC Northwest this year.
Right.
West Carroll Thunder came in last year and kind of underperformed from what we had expected them to be. They finished overall at 4-5, went 3-5 in the NUIC Northwest, but last year, Shane, we had them picked as being a potential playoff team. They had 3 critical losses to Dakota, Amboy, and Lena Winslow that kept the Thunder out of the playoffs. Can they improve on the mental aspects and get back in the playoffs? And can they overcome the top tier of the Northwest, teams that they struggle with consistently?
Well, anytime you lose a game close like they did against Dakota, Amboy, obviously Lee win. Played Forreston somewhat tough. I don't put a lot of stock into that, although Forreston uses that as one of their stepping stones to winning the state title. So obviously you can't dismiss that game fully. But anytime you lose games like that, it can only help you build. You know, close losses, a loss is a loss, but a close loss is a heck of a lot better than a 40-point loss. The mental aspect of it, you know, you get it in your mind that you can play with these teams and you can win. Because it's not that far ago where West Carroll, you know, you're going to Dakota and Lee win, and you're just chalking up at a loss because before you get on the field, it's a mental.
Right.
You know, oh no, we got to go to Dakota, or no, oh no, we got the Panthers coming to town. Mentally, I think West Carroll can get by it. They're obviously going to have some very winnable games. Might come down to a key game here or there that'll ultimately get them to the 5th win to get to the playoffs. I like the Thunder this year.
And I agree with you. I mean, you look at what Coach Lightson has done in the time that he's been with West Carroll. I mean, he took them to the playoffs 2 seasons ago. Last year, they just missed. Granted, the 3 games that we mentioned were games that they could have won to get into the playoffs. But Coach Lightson definitely has the Thunder on the right direction as far as they want to go. And if you look at some of their top returners from last year, I mean, you got quarterback Cody Plattenberger coming back. He'll be a third-year starter this year. Threw for 778 yards last year with 10 touchdowns, and he was an honorable mention all-conference utility player. And then you got his brother Caleb coming back as well, who caught 23 passes for 267 yards and was a first-team all-conference end. You add that with linebacker and running back Devin Murray, where Devin was a first-team all-conference linebacker. He is one of our picks as one of the top 5 linebackers, or top 6 linebackers coming back for this season. And then Caleb Hartman also at the running back position, who ran for 306 yards and 3 touchdowns last year. So the numbers aren't overly impressive, but the people that they have coming back are.
Right, and those 4 kids, you're returning them at skill positions. And like you said, the numbers might not be great, but it's another year, it's another summer to work out. You don't digress, you only progress.
Correct.
So, you know, I think that points very well for the Thunder.
Yeah, and then you add in the key tight end position, which we all know the tight end position in the NUIC is a very vital
crucial
position. And that's Corey Simpson. He'll be playing at the tight end and linebacker position on defense. And then you got some linemen. You got Seth Curry and Carson Metz and Dean Holm coming back. And all those guys are going to play on the opposite side of the line, playing on the defensive side as well. And then you got some pass catchers in Jacob Dunk and Matt Eaker, neither of whom really had a lot of playing time last year, but they should see quite a bit of playing time this year, especially with Cody Plattenberger at the QB position. West Carroll does like to throw the ball. They have for a long time, but they're a very good, balanced team, and these guys could be the core of a lot to come ahead for West Carroll.
Right, and anytime you bring that many kids back, signs point up, that's for sure.
Yeah, so, I mean, West Carroll, I would expect is still going to be very competitive this year, as they have been each of the last 2 seasons. I feel that they did underperform last year, so this year is kind of like a revenge statement. You know, let's get back to our winning ways and let's get back to the playoffs. These Dubuque Warriors came in last season with high hopes, and they started off the season that way, starting off 4-1. They ended up finishing 4-5 overall and going 3-5 in the NUIC Northwest. Coming off of a great start to the season, the Warriors lost it all in the second half. With a lot of experience returning, can East Dubuque make the playoffs for the first time since the 2013 season?
I think it's highly possible. Whether it's likely or not remains to be seen. When you return a lot of players, it's obviously in your favor to do so, but as we've talked about some of the other teams, they're also improving and returning a lot of players too. So it's kind of a cycle. It all depends on who improves more. But like you said, they return a lot of players. It all is going to come down to how the games play out. Like you said, last year they started off good, but their schedule was severely backloaded. I think we sat here and they were at 4-1, and we were talking. They were at the top of the conference with Forreston at the time. I mean, Forreston was obviously undefeated, but then East Dubuque and them were 4-1, and we sat here and said, well, East Dubuque's not going to make the playoffs, and it's like, how can you say that when they're 5 games in and they've won 4 of them? But that's the way the schedule was, and we'll have to see how it goes.
So last year they had a back-end loaded schedule. Right. This year it's opposite. It's front end.
Right.
They start off with the EPC, and then in weeks 3 and 4, they meet Leland and Dakota, which were all 3 of those games were losses for the Warriors last season. You throw in the fact that they have Forreston in week 6, and then they end the season with West Carroll, and then in week 8 even their crossover games with Orangeville, a team that we've already stated we see to be improved, and on top of that, Orangeville's ready for a little bit of redemption from what happened last season in Orangeville.
Right. So you look at that, out of those teams you list, and you kind of break it down as where they're going to get that win where they didn't have it last year. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, they do have, like we said, a lot of returners coming back. One of the key spots is at the quarterback position where they have John Breitbach coming back, who's the coach's son. Last year he was 71 for 145 for 839 yards. Very good numbers, but he did have only 6 touchdowns. And then he had another 61 attempts for 345 yards. And he ended up being named honorable mention all-conference QB. Another kid that will be a huge returner is Jackson Bowman, the running back and linebacker. Last year he ran for 585 yards. And then Lane Boyer as well at the wide receiver position, where he garnered honorable mention all-conference at that position, grabbing 22 catches for 296 yards. Some other guys that are going to be pretty impactful for the Warriors this season are guys that most people outside of East Dubuque are not very aware of, and that's Logan Kipper and Kyle Sheehan on the offensive lines, and then you got Josh Kiefer and Ethan Orcutt. Both are running backs and linebackers that will be coming up to the varsity level, and you can even throw in Logan Marshall in that mix. So that could be your core of linebackers right there, and that would, help fill the role of, the Jack Kessel type players where they were honorable mention all conference. So really, Shane, East Dubuque is still going to be a very competitive team, I think. It's going to be a team that you don't want to overlook. We'll see where they end up.
Right.
It could be middle of the road because as of yet, since they've switched from the upstate to the Northwest, they haven't proven that they can compete with the top tier of the teams of the Northwest Conference. But having the amount of returners they have, you could see a potential for a very good season out of the Warriors. With the addition of a new field comes the addition of a new team. Dakota last year went 7-4 overall, 5-3 in the NUIC Northwest, before they lost in the second round to Marquette in a very tight game, 26-20. Now, will Dakota have critical areas to fill at running back and linebacker with the loss of All-Stater Andrew Winger? And then, of course, the hole that they need to fill at the quarterback position. Will the Indians be able to climb above the average playoff team moniker that they've occurred since basically 2011 when they won their last state title?
Well, I think that's a good question to ask. Andrew Winger brought a lot to that team, but I think where you'll miss him the most is actually on the defensive side of the ball compared to the offense. I mean, anytime you have to replace an all-state player, it's obviously tough. But to your question exactly, are they going to be a powerhouse? I don't see it this year. I think the top teams in the conference, Lena Winslow and obviously Forreston, when we break them down here in a little bit, you kind of have them up here, and you kind of have Dakota in here somewhere. So, obviously, not taking anything away from the Indians. We haven't played it down. A lot of impactful players coming up. I could definitely see the Indians being better than last year. I just don't know if a powerhouse is where you want to label them at this point.
Well, and going back to, like you said, last year, they were really a Jekyll and Hyde type of team. They were up and down, up and down. They had a lot of highs and lows.
Right.
And even their playoff loss to Marquette, to me, looking at the conference that Marquette comes out of, like we've talked about before, because obviously Marquette beat Aquin and Milledgeville last year as well before they finally met their demise against Forreston in the semifinals. But to me, Dakota should have or could have very easily won that game, just as easily as Milledgeville and Aquin could have won their games and put Marquette to bed long before Forreston blew them out.
Right. And that's always one of those hard things to gauge because, yes, Marquette beat Dakota, but I will still sit here today and say that Dakota probably would have gave Forreston a better game than Marquette did. Obviously, familiarity, just one thing. It's always hard to use that property in football of, well, we beat Team A, so Team B and C, we're going to beat that. I mean, you can't use that in football because every team stacks up differently.
So with that, Dakota does have a lot of returners coming back. One of those main returners is going to be Maverick McPeak, who is on the offensive and defensive lines. He was an honorable mention All-Stater last year, along with being an area All-Star. He was first-team All-Conference offensive line and honorable mention All-Conference defensive line. Then you got the two tight ends, Carter Drake and Brock Duncan. Both of them have been multi-year starters. Both of them can bring a lot to the table, both offensively and defensively. It's just now this year, the quarterback position.
Right.
By the looks of it, Kyle Bordner is going to be the incumbent on that position. He'll be a senior, but he really hasn't had a lot of playing time at the varsity level behind Cade Meyer and Blake Schleter in the previous two seasons. So, really, will he be able to get those guys into the offensive realm? And then, like we said, you're replacing an All-Stater in Andrew Winger. Granted, he was more of an All-Stater for the defensive side of the ball, just as he had been his junior year. But in the running back position, you have Mason Peters coming back. A lot of people don't know about Mason Peters, but he's only an incoming junior. And in all honesty, he's going to be that stud type of running back / linebacker that Dakota is known for putting out in years past.
Right. He's unknown to a lot of people. You look at his stats from last year, 17 carries for 144 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a reception for 16 yards. On paper, that looks like nothing. But that was in a playoff game when Andrew Winger was absent for the first half. You know, Mason Peters, like you said, could be the type of running back that you traditionally see come from Dakota. Tough kid, also very fast, though. Has that, not unusual, but you don't see as often where you get a tough kid, but also a really fast runner as well. So that is obviously a big asset to what Dakota's going to try and do. My expectations for this kid are very high. Could he be a top 5 running back in the conference? That remains to be seen. But if he has the drive to do so, I think that's very possible.
Oh, definitely, and I could see that being a very great possibility. And you look at Dakota in general, they've had one of the best off seasons that they've had in a long time. They've actually put 8 kids in the 1,000-pound club this year, which is a school record. Even the fabled 2005 team did not have that many 1,000-pound club members in the same season. Dakota has 8 of them this year. So you're talking about Dakota strong, coming back and being that physical type of team that you're used to seeing. And going with Mason Peters in the backfield, you're going to have Grant Gallagher and Aiden Cassidy, both kids that saw times last year at that level. And all 3 of these guys are only juniors. And then you add in Trey Engelbrecht as well. He's going to get a lot of time in that backfield too, and he's up to about 205, 210 pounds. So you're talking about a lot of muscle back there. You got fast guys like Cassidy and Gallagher back there, which are also strong. All 4 of them guys are on the 1,000-pound club. And then you got, people on the offensive lines. Nate Taylor. You're looking at Eric Quinnett. And then another guy like Luke Schwartz is going to be, he'll be on the defensive line, but he's only a sophomore. He's going to be a very tough kid to stop. I mean, a lot of people don't know what Dakota's going to be this year, but I'm telling you, Dakota's got the makings of a solid platform here, and can very easily surprise a lot of teams this year.
I would agree with that. Definitely a team you don't want to overlook. Based on what they have coming back, and another year under the coach, you're finally getting kids comfortable with this program. They will play with the top teams in the conference. If not, the problem is within. Talent-wise, they might not match up exactly perfect, but they will play with the teams. If not, like I said, they are the problem.
Well, and that's where we really saw a lot of problems with Dakota last year, pass defense. Can they improve that? We know that they have the speed. They've proven that they have the speed. Now we know they have the strength. Can they put that all together to have that solid defense that we've seen for the past, outside of last season, the previous 2 seasons before, where they were very fast, very quick to the ball? Can Coach Freeze, fit 5-3 defense, continue to do that, in which you need a very fast defense to do that?
Right, and that remains to be seen. And, as high as we are on this year's team, I think next year the conversation we could have with this team could be at the likes of Forreston. Obviously, Forreston is a proven team. This is not. I'm not comparing the 2 now because that is ridiculous.
To say compare them to Forreston.
Right. I'm saying that I believe this team is a year away.
Yeah. Dakota's got a big gap to close. Coach Free and company know they have a big gap to close on that top level. We'll see if they do it. Going to a conference rival, we're looking at the Lena Winslow Panthers. Last year, Lena Winslow went 9-3 overall, 6-2 in the NUIC Northwest before they lost to Forreston in the quarterfinals, 44-7, which was a lot different score than what their first matchup was in the regular season with that 13-7 loss. Lena Winslow is looking for their 19th straight playoff appearance under Coach Rick Arend. And really, I feel that Lena Winslow is reloading yet again. It's not really like they're just going to make the playoffs. They're looking for another long run like the quarterfinals last year.
Right, and something that we always touch base with the Lena Winslow team is they're notorious for starting slow. This year could be a little tough go if they do that. We see an improved West Carroll team. Then week 2, they're playing Forreston. So obviously, it goes without saying, Forreston is the cream of the crop of 1A this year. For me personally, I look at the 44-7 as more of a true testament that the 2 teams were last year than the first meeting. So then you look at that, if Forreston starts out at what they finished last year, how does Lena Winslow close that 44-7 gap?
That's very true. And, I mean, I told a lot of people last year, just based off your own sentiment you just made, that Forreston was easily 3 touchdowns better than Lena Winslow last year. But Forreston made a lot of mistakes in the first half of that regular season game that kept Lena Winslow in the game. But if you notice the way Forreston came out in the second half and they kept things moving and kept going, pushing, and what a lot of people fail to realize is that Forreston could have easily scored a 3rd touchdown to make that gap even larger in the final score. But out of respect between the 2 coaches and the programs and the conference in general, they chose to take the right decision, and that was just to run out the clock.
Right.
And a lot of people fail to realize that. Well, looking at Lena Winslow this year, they lose their quarterback, they lose their 2 running backs, but really those are just replacement parts.
Right.
Because I feel that the running backs that they have coming in this year are probably going to be a little bit better than the running backs that they lost last year.
Right, and how many times haven't we seen quarterbacks come in and out of Lena Winslow that it doesn't matter?
Well, you're going to see it again this year. They're taking Ty Crispin from tight end and putting him in the quarterback position. It seems like Lawford did the same thing, went from tight end to quarterback. I mean, it
doesn't matter.
You just need somebody that can control the ball, and obviously Ty Crispin's that guy that knows how to take handoffs. He did it at the fresh soft level when he was a quarterback back then. So that's all you need. You need somebody to be able to take that handoff and give it to Valentine or whoever else is going to be in the backfield with them.
Right, and Valentine's another one we talk about. Played varsity as a freshman. I mean, we've talked about Valentine so often over the last years. He's finally a senior.
I know. It seems like he's never going to graduate, but you're right. This year he's a senior. He was first-team All-State last year, first-team All-Conference, both at running back and defensive back positions. He ran for 1,435 yards last year, which actually led the entire area. He had 17 touchdowns, and his career yardage is just over 2,300 yards coming into this season.
And if you think about it, with Valentine, think of all the games where he's been hurt.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you saw it even last year, Game 1 in Pearl City against EPC. He came out of the game limping on his ankle. They'd hurt the year before.
Right.
So, I expect a big season out of Ravion this year. I really do, based off of last year's numbers. But he's going to have to be more durable in order to lead Lena Winslow back to a playoff run as they had last year.
And I couldn't agree more. He's definitely the player to click for this team. Without him, they are obviously not anywhere near as good.
Right. I mean, he's your speed threat. I mean, if you've seen him, he's up to 185 pounds now, so he's gotten bigger. He's gotten stronger. And you need him on both sides of the ball. I hate to say it, but you do have some good linemen coming in with them as well. And those linemen are Ian Keel and Michael Jones. Both of them were first-team All-Conference last year. Ian Keel was first-team All-Conference at offensive linebacker and honorable mention at linebacker. And then Michael Jones was first-team All-Conference at defensive line and an honorable mention center. You add that with another running back in Gage Schwartz. Gage Schwartz was only basically a return man last year. He may have filled in a little bit here and there, obviously, because he had 28 attempts. But he is a very fast kid, and he'll bring some. But the kid that I'm really interested to see about is going to be Isaiah Bruce. And if they do utilize him at that fullback position, where he did play a little bit last year, but he didn't get any carries, really. And then he definitely stepped in big time in that first matchup with Forreston at defensive end when Parker McGee went down with an injury. And there's another guy right there. McGee himself will be coming back this year as a junior to start on at that defensive end position and basically be the starting tight end as well. So they have the right pieces together, and then you got another Valentine out there, and Ronell Valentine. He did a lot at the fresh soft level last year as a freshman. Granted, you can't take that into the varsity like we've
Right.
stated before, but the kids got gears that a lot of kids, even at the varsity level, don't have.
Right. And, I mean, that's something you don't. That's something you can't coach. I mean, you either have it or you don't.
Right.
And with Lena Winslow, they have that. I mean, the older Valentine, you can't coach speed, and that's his biggest asset. So obviously, going back to that, like I said, he is, your two Valentines might be the key to the season for Lena Winslow.
Oh, I don't disagree there one bit. I mean, I'm not stating that Coach Aaron is going to start Ronell in the backfield at the start of the season, but I would not be surprised to see him later on down the road after a few games and they've got the playoffs pretty much in hand and say, hey, all right, here you go, kid. Run the ball a few times, let's see what you have, and get you ready to go in the playoffs.
Well, and that's what makes him so dangerous. I mean, every year the adjustments that are made as the year progresses. The schedule comes out every year, and you look for Lena Winslow, and the other 8 coaches are probably wanting to play Lena Winslow as soon as you can.
Right. I mean, you want to get that win on the record, but, I mean, we stated it last year, and I'm going to stand behind it this year. I mean, Rick Aaron is the best head coach we have in the entire conference. Hands down. Nobody compares to him. He makes the best adjustments. He gets the most out of his players. He may not get that at the beginning of the season, but by the time they get to the end of the season, they're in the playoffs and they're playing their best ball. And that's really what matters. I mean, yeah, you'd like to see Lena Winslow compete for that conference championship. I think this year is a year where they can get back to that echelon and compete for that conference championship. But
in the grand scheme,
it
doesn't matter.
You're playing for state titles, not conference titles.
Right. And that's where at Lena Winslow it's different. At your Galenas, your Stocktons, you see the big picture. It looks nice in the gym, but what looks great is the trophy.
Yeah, the trophy and then the big banner with the whole state on it. I mean, that's what it's about.
Right.
I mean, granted, not everybody's going to win state. We know that.
Right.
But if you look at what we've done and what our conference has done in the last 14 seasons, bringing home 11 state titles, by gosh, man, that's the goal.
Exactly. So we'll see what the team does. But I like the Panthers this year, though.
Yeah, I do. I think they're going to be a threat to do some damage in the Northwest Division, and I think they can make some good runs in the playoffs, too, again. The EPC Wildcats came out last year with predictions of being where they were in 2015 at that 2-7, 3-6, 4-5 type mark. But they actually brought it out to an 8-2 record overall, going 7-1 in the NUIC Northwest before they lost in the first round to Rock Ridge, 42-13. They did lose 3 key players last year in Northwest MVP Brighton Haverland, running back Keegan Schubert, and wide receiver Skylar Fisher. These are big holes that they will need to fill. But the Cats have a strong junior class that has been talked about for the past 2 seasons. Can they keep EPC in the playoffs despite the high expectations of this fan base? And, of course, the always strong northwest side of the NUIC?
Well, that's an interesting question. Personally, I think they'll make the playoffs. That's we can stamp that as probably likely at this point. However, if you have the same expectations based off where you finished last year, I think that's where you'll probably separate yourself from me. And I know I'm not going to make too many friends over in EPC territory, but I do not look for them to actually be as good as they were last year. I just don't see it.
I don't either. I mean, you're talking about replacing a quarterback that's where all your yards passing came from. You're talking about replacing your receiver who basically caught the majority of those passes.
Right.
And you're talking about your leading rusher being gone. And now you're replacing them with guys that I feel can be capable, but there's no proof that they're going to be.
Right.
I mean, yeah, they've played at the varsity level the last 2 seasons, and this is their 3rd year of starting, which, granted, gives them very valuable experience.
Right.
We know they're strong, but outside of 2 linemen, there's not a lot of size there. I mean, outside of the known linemen, which are Peyton Ashe and Addison Keltner, the next biggest lineman's only 190 pounds.
Right. And you look at some of the teams we've talked about and the next team we're going to talk about, and size is nice, but the previous teams are probably going to beat you off the ball with their speed, and they're bigger. So that creates problems for the EPC line, for sure.
Right. I mean, EPC is going to be a big question mark this year. Yes, we can say they're going to make playoffs as long as they show up to play and whatnot. But, I mean, Braden Smargessi filled in at quarterback last year in week 8 when they played Forreston. And his overall numbers for the year were 14 of 29 for 206 yards, but really Haverland was the quarterback.
Right.
And I feel that they went to Smargessi in that game to utilize Haverland at tight end to try to offset Forreston, which obviously it didn't really work that well. And I know that Smargessi could, at least last year, did not throw a ball like Haverland could.
Right.
So, yeah, that... But they have a lot of good things going on, and like we said, I mean, in order for EPC to be effective this year, they're going to have to get behind that line. We know they have strength. They won the lineman challenge at Morrison in the offseason, which was a great thing for EPC. And they have some capable running backs in the Kemple twins, Jaden and Jared. I mean, Jaden last year ran for 525 yards on 88 carries with 8 touchdowns. Jared had 49 attempts for 354 yards with another 3 touchdowns, and then he did catch 11 balls for 128 yards. And then on the other side of Braden Smargessi, you have his twin brother, Brock, who caught 4 passes for 49 yards. But that's not really being effective in the offensive schemes for the EPC Wildcats.
Right, and another thing that we haven't touched on really is that EPC is a two-way team. So the conference, the high teams at the conference somewhat prepare you, but yet they don't. Obviously, Forreston last year would, for all intents and purposes, probably would have won the two-way title. So I would put that as a good measuring stick for where EPC needs to be for the playoffs. But they win the title in 2014, then all of a sudden we start to get back into what EPC, which is losing in the first or second round against quality track teams. It is what it is. They got to figure out how to get by that again.
And you're right, they will, because I mean their first round loss last year was to a track team. So some key areas where they're going to pick up though is like Drake Musser playing center and linebacker. You got Elijah Dirtz. He got into the game and became an offensive starter on the line as a freshman last year. This year he'll be a senior. He's a lot stronger. One of those kids that made the 1,000-pound club already as only an incoming sophomore. He'll be back at the offensive line and linebacker position, but me personally, with this kid's strength and his speed, I mean, yeah, most likely EPC's going to have to use him on the offensive line, but he'd be the perfect fullback.
A bruiser.
Yeah. You do have the previous mentioned people in Peyton Ashe. Peyton Ashe has received a Division I offer from Illinois State. He was first-team all-conference on the offensive and defensive lines, so he does return. He actually returns as one of our picks of the top 6 offensive and defensive linemen coming back for the 2017 season. And then you have Addison Keltner as well, who will be an incoming junior, returning on both the offensive and defensive line. And then our guy who's going to step up into this position, also another lineman, is going to be Brian Brenner. And this is a kid who has worked his tail off this offseason. He's done a lot of great things to get himself ready for the season. He's gotten stronger, bigger, the whole 9 yards.
Right, and collectively I think EPC feels pretty good about their team. I mean, they should. I mean, they will be a quality team, and coming from the NUIC Northwest, there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. But there are some glaring holes, like the previous three, your all-stars of your team, your team MVP, the conference MVP. That's very difficult to replace.
It is. And it's not like a lot has changed as far as the dynamic of the team outside of those three players. I mean, this was a very much sophomore and junior dominated team last year, being carried by three seniors that played on their 2014 state title team as sophomores.
Right, and I guess where I look at it, my biggest point is you can break it down all you want, and it ultimately comes down, has EPC going to improve from last year to this year, because the conference has improved. Forreston is going to be better than they were last year. So
definitely.
Galena Winslow a little better than they were last year. Dakota. So ultimately, has EPC grown within themselves to be better than last year? And I don't buy it at this point.
I don't either. I definitely see him as a top contender in the NUIC. Specifically in the Northwest Division. I see them making the playoffs, but they're gonna be harder to get those wins than they were last year. And you look at their schedule, okay, they're starting off with a few games, but in week 4 is where it really starts to turn for them, because they have Forreston and Galena Winslow in back-to-back weeks, and then they get Dakota in week 8.
Which who knows what that'll be at this point.
Right. We don't know what that game's going to be, but another team to really watch out for, a team that really gave a lot of these playoff teams fits in the Northwest Division, was West Carroll, and they have West Carroll in week 7.
Right. So it might be tough.
It's going to be a tough go for EPC, but I think that they have the right drive. Coach Ashley has them prepared and ready to go for the season.
For sure.
And that's what, at this time of the year, you really need to have. But they do have a lot of question marks that need to be answered. All right, we have the defending state champs, the Forreston Cardinals, who went 14-0 last year, 8-0 in the NUIC Northwest. And they pretty much annihilated everybody en route to their second state title. You take a look at some of their numbers that they had. They ran for 5,300 yards last year, which was the 5th most yardage total rushing by any team across all classes in state history. And they have all those kids coming back. The holes that they're going to need to fill, though, are going to be big time on the defensive side and either the offensive and defensive lines. They lose linebacker and all-stater Noah Geip. And then with other losses of Cody Moser, Steve Christensen, Cody Stewart, and Cameron Tim, and then you've got good defensive players in Joseph Fiorello and Tyler Bryant, can Forreston rebuild this defense, get in search of their 3rd state title in the last 4 seasons, and potentially become the first NUIC team to repeat as back-to-back state champs?
Well, I think they can, and it's actually very likely. We've talked a little bit off camera how 1A collectively is down, especially in the South, so it looks like, we don't want to beat a dead horse, but you get to DeKalb this year, and you're probably going to walk away with the title. The problem for me is what you just said. Repeating. We have examples of teams that should have repeated and haven't. We can go back to the 2010 Galena team who won state championship, and then their 2011 team, which in my opinion was better than their 2010 team because, they rolled everybody up until the time they faced Dakota and were well on their way with rolling Dakota until all of a sudden you have an injury of Quinn Haas, your all-star running back. And then, the playoffs start. They got an easy opponent with Durand, and then the way the scheduling was, Dakota came to Galena Winslow. Haas isn't healed, and Dakota walks away with a win, ultimately all the way to the state championship. you get to that point, and you are literally one injury away from having it all gone. I mean, not only that, the football part is only one part of it. Obviously, talent. They look to have plenty enough talent. You also need to have some luck. You also need to have the team. You know, you lose Noah Geip, who was a team leader and was your heart and soul on defense. So you got to replace those keys. And obviously, Forreston and Coach Denny Didick does a great job of building not only football players but men. So you hope off-field issues that can bother other teams don't bother your team, and they ultimately stay focused on getting to where they need to be, which, in my opinion, for Forreston to get back to where they were last year, you go from week to week and you win the games, and it's repetitive, but you got to improve. And I think that's basically what's going to be key. For me, Forreston plays their game, they stay healthy, very possible to repeat.
Oh, definitely. And like you said, I mean, we're talking about replacing valuable leadership. But Coach Didick has that team, you already said it, bred to become men.
They're robots, basically.
Yes. So basically they're all leaders. They all can lead each other, and that's a great thing. And that's one of the things we talked about this Forreston team last year was comparing it to the 2014 team. You know, the 2014 team had that bit of air of we're better than you, except you, EPC, because you kicked our butts anyway. But hey, we're the best team in 1A.
Right.
Whereas last year's team, you said it, would they win the 2A title? Not sure, but could they definitely compete for it? For sure, right. Absolutely. But then you're looking at how they respond and how they act. And you saw them get in tight games against Lena Winslow and EPC, and they held on to win those tight games, which tells me that those games, a lot of people criticize them for. To me, that tells you what the mark of a true champion is. And these kids are grounded, and Coach Didick makes them that way. So Forreston has a lot to look forward to coming into 2017. I mean, we're talking about the opportunity and potential of becoming the first back-to-back state champ in NUIC history. Winning 3 titles in 4 years, no team's ever done that. I mean, they're already in the echelon on their own with Dakota as the only 2 teams to ever win 2 state titles in 3 years. And we're talking about putting them on another platform where they could be the first to win 3 and 4 seasons. So, and like you said, they have everybody coming back. And to top that off, we'll just start rolling down the list because you got AJ Christensen coming back. AJ's going to be on pace for a 3,000-plus yard career rushing total. He's sitting at 2,166 rushing yards right now. He was first-team All-Conference, honorable mention All-Conference at defensive back. He was first-team All-State and area All-Star. And then you combine that with Matt Akins. Matt Akins, 2 seasons ago, led the entire area in rushing yards. Comes back his junior year, puts up 773 yards on 167 attempts. Do the math, it's still a very good average. Matt was the workhorse for these guys. Right. I mean, he took a lot of punishment to help lay off what the other ones were doing. And he, too, is going for that 3,000-yard rushing mark with 2,038 career rushing yards. And then you bring in the trio of that, and you have Gavin Fox, who last year really was his first year running the ball as far as I can tell based on stat-wise. But last year alone he had 1,064 yards, 13 touchdowns. He was a first-team All-Conference defensive back, honorable mention All-Conference running back. And he did a lot of great things for that offense that a lot of people don't even know who Gavin Fox really is unless they've played him.
Right. And, I mean, you can backtrack. You know, you look at Aiken's numbers last year and everybody's, well, what's wrong? You know, nothing's wrong. You know, we learned quickly with covering Forreston that not only had you better be ready to go, that it's nothing within the first series that you got 6 different guys carrying the ball, and all of them are just as important as another.
Yeah, and that's exactly how Dubuque and company utilize it. You know, you've seen key third down possessions where those 3 guys are off on the field, and you're like, what are you doing?
Right.
Just to watch Garrett Bodicher or somebody else run through the hole and get the first down. You're like,
exactly.
Where'd these kids come from?
Right.
I mean, and speaking of Bodicher, I mean, heck, he ran for 637 yards. He only had 4 touchdowns, but he did a great job of basically backing up Matt Akins. So Akins comes out, needs a breather. Bodicher goes in, and it's like nothing changed.
Not bad for a complimentary back, right?
Right. I mean,
and
he's only going to be a junior this year.
Right, and another kid we haven't even talked about is the leadership in Hunter Dawes.
Oh, yes. I mean, you talk about a kid that doesn't get a lot of recognition. Hunter Dawes is that guy. I mean, you got to have somebody that not only knows the plays, but knows the personnel, knows how to carry the ball, handle the ball, and he does that perfectly for this offense. I mean, he just runs this offense to a T. And then, heck, we're forgetting one guy already in Sam Barklow. I mean, he's tight end linebacker. A lot of people didn't hear about him coming into the 2016 season, but after 2016, everybody's heard about him. I mean, he just recently committed to Western Illinois University to be a tight end there. He's coming in this year as a senior year. He was an all-conference honorable mention linebacker last year. He had 6 other offers on the table outside of Western Illinois. Chose to go with the Leathernecks because he felt that that was a place that he could fit in and really make a change and play. And, you know, nothing's set in stone there, obviously, because it's just a verbal commitment at this time until he signs that letter of intent. But that's a great thing for a D1 kid to come out of a Class 1A school such as Forreston. And it's just amazing.
Well, it's funny you say that because we were talking off camera. You know, when did Sam Barklow become what he is? You know, we think back, we did our players to watch last year, and obviously Akins and Hayden Fox and Andrew Winger or whatever. You know, he wasn't on our radar. And we got to thinking, when did he become on our radar? And, you know, not that we're experts on what we do, but to not even be on the radar of a kid who we talk about to go into a D1 commit, I mean, that speaks volumes for what the Forreston program is doing. And not only on the field, but a great kid off the field as well.
Oh, he definitely is. He's very grounded. He buys into what Dubuque's doing. You know, he is. He's just a very polite kid, very nice. Knows how to have fun, but knows how to do it within the realms of what he needs to do and stay focused on. And I mean, he's so humble. I mean, that's the great thing about him. I mean, he's not one of those kids that goes out there and showboats himself to other people and says, hey, look at me.
Exactly.
And that's what I love about him. I mean, that is just a huge guy to be able to take a lot of leadership from. And then, I mean, you're talking about other kids, too. I mean, we got Braden Walton, Michael Singley, and Mitchell Hines all coming back, all on the offensive and defensive lines. Neither one of the 3 played both ways last year. You could see that happen this year, but all 3 of them were all conference members, whether it be first team or honorable mention. So, really, the biggest holes to fill, linebacker, you still have all your cornerbacks back. You got 3 guys that can easily take up 3 of the 4 or 5 linemen on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And you got all your running backs back. And your quarterback.
And to go a little off of what we would normally do here, so I'm going to throw you for a loop. You know, we go through all this. How do you beat Forreston?
Well, it's easy. Really. I mean, Forreston comes at you with the same stuff every time. It's not so long ago that we were talking about Coach Dubuque being the guy who couldn't win the big game.
Right.
Now, granted, he's kind of come into his own here in the recent years, And I think by finally gaining that state title in 2014, it's allowed him to relax. The thing is, to beat Forreston, you have to play for a full 4 quarters.
Right.
And if you're not conditioned to do so, good luck, because you're not going to beat them. They're the best conditioned team in the state in Class 1A and 2A, hands down. Nobody out-conditions Forreston. Nobody. I've watched, and you've watched, all these teams, north to south, 1A and 2A, nobody competes with Forreston when it comes to conditioning.
And that's just it. I mean, that goes a long way. And, you know, as we've run down the teams here and we've seen this team or that team improve, and you like to see teams improve, but you just can't get it out of your head the fact that these teams might improve, and all these teams here might have great years, but the problem is Forreston.
Right. And, I mean, granted, okay, injuries. We talked about injuries. Injuries can happen. Forreston's still set up to be able to withstand a major injury to one player. But if there's a certain set of players that get major injuries, now you're going to have a problem.
Right.
Because they cannot withstand multiple major injuries. Now, realistically, let's take a look at how many injuries they actually had last year. And you can take a look at what their workout program and regiment are, which is to basically remove the impact of an injury occurring. And that's what the CrossFit program that Didick installed is all about.
Eliminate the soft tissue injury.
Right, exactly. So, I don't know. You got a lot of good kids. You got 2 other good kids in Joe Bowers and Kayleen Davids that saw some time last year at the varsity level. Even Evan Kelsey. These are guys that can come back in, play significant roles, and get Forreston rolling again. But even Forreston knows you're going to get everybody's best shot because you're the state champ. Okay, so we just broke down what each team in the NUIC Northwest Division has coming back, kind of an outlook of what we expect of them. So now we're going to go into our predictions aspect, and I'll go ahead and start this, Shane. As far as the Northwest Division goes, I see Forreston still claiming that top spot in the Northwest Division, going 9-0. Followed by them, I have the Lena Winslow Panthers going 8-1. Then comes the EPC Wildcats. I have them at 7-2. And then Dakota at 6-3. And really, I could take those 2 teams, flip a coin, and say, Dakota, you're going 6-3, or 7-2, and EPC, you're going to do the same thing. That's where my flip-flop's at. West Carroll, I expect to be more competitive. I have them at 5-4. I could see them getting to 6-3 and possibly upsetting an EPC, maybe even a Lena Winslow. They play very tough, but they still have not proven that they can beat that upper echelon of top-tier teams in the Northwest Division. After West Carroll, I have East Dubuque going 4-5. They're going to be a very competitive ball team. They have the potential of getting to that 5-4 mark. 6-3, I think, is going to be a stretch, but they have a lot of key contributors coming back, a lot of good talent coming back. 4-5 to me is a good spot for East Dubuque, but they can make that if they want it. They have to want it. Last year, they proved to me that they didn't want it. They started off 4-1, lost some key games that they could have played with easily. Didn't want it. After that, I have Amboy going 2-7, basically repeating what they did last year. I just don't see them being at top. They have the capability of also winning a couple more games, but I don't think they have what it takes to compete with the top 4 for sure. I don't know if they have enough to compete with West Carroll this year either, but time will tell. But 2-7 is where I have Amboy. After that, I have the newly formed Du-Pec Rivermen, also going 2-7, grabbing a couple wins on the way. I just think that the combination of a new coach, new team, new uniforms, new attitude is going to elevate Du-Pec's play as the new co-op. So 2-7 for Du-Pec. And to round it out, I have Galena missing the playoffs for the first time in back-to-back years in 33 years, going 1-8. I just don't see where Galena has the fortitude to make it to the next level. To me, their shot at the top tier of that echelon where they once stood is starting to kind of slip.
Well, Kyle, our top teams are very similar. Obviously, we talked a lot about the Forreston Cardinals. 9-0 is a very good possibility where we'll find them. Next, I have the Lena-Winslow Panthers at 8-1. Obviously, making that Forreston-Winslow matchup being Lena's only loss. I think that could be a great game, though. A few plays here or there. Who knows? Next, I have EPC at 7-2, and then Dakota at 6-3. Basically, I'm going to mirror what you said. That's a Week 8 matchup. We don't know what Dakota will be at that time. We don't know what EPC will be at that time. You could flip a coin, pick a winner, put it on a piece of paper. Looks good to me. Next, here's where Kyle and I drastically differ. I have Galena going 5-4. They might not have what it takes to get to where they once were. We've talked whether they've quit on the coach, whether they need to change some revitalization, whatever. I'm going to give them 5 wins. I know it's crazy. Next, I have
possible.
Right, it's possible. Anything's possible with these teams. Next, West Carroll at 4-5. Now, at West Carroll 4-5, I had them losing to Galena. If they beat Galena, they're going to go 5-4. They're going to make the playoffs. So realistically, that's not far off from where you're at with West Carroll, and it's very possible. Next, Amboy at 2-7. I just don't think it's going to be another disappointing year for the Clippers. I'm sorry. Welcome to the NUIC Part 2. Next, East Dubuque 1-8. Like you said, they started off great. They bring a lot back. I just think that the other teams have improved more than what they will have. And Du-Pec 0-9. I'm sorry. I think we're not too far away from having a good Du-Pec team. I think that they could win a couple games this year, like you said. It's all going to come back to whether the two towns form together, create a good atmosphere for the kids to thrive on Friday nights. And I think they have a good coach in place to get the job done. I just don't know if it'll happen this year, but I wish them all the best of luck, and that goes for all the other teams listed. I like this year and what it's going to play out to be.
Well, it's like you said. I mean, Du-Pec, you're taking 2 0-9 teams, putting them together. New coach, new scheme. Can they do it? It's possible, but we got to see it happen.
Right.
So our panel vote for the NUIC Northwest is going to be as follows, and this is going to include mine, Shane, and Carrie's votes. We all have Forreston going 9-0, followed by Lena-Winslow at 8-1. So all three of us agree on that. After that, it's kind of a split decision. We got EPC at 7-2 and Dakota at 7-2. Basically, like we said, flip a coin. Who's going to win?
If they could both be 7-2, they would both be 7-2.
Right.
But they can't.
After that, we have West Carroll at 4-5. There again, they're right on that bubble of potentially making the playoffs, and we'll see what happens. Amboy, East Dubuque, and Galena, collectively, we all have at 3-6. So that'll be interesting to see how that really plays out, to see who beats who, where it's going to go. There is a good possibility that each of them could beat each other up and finish at that 2-7, 3-6 for mark. And then to round out the end are the Du-Pec Rivermen. We have them as a panel going 1-8, so we do get them on the victory board.
Madison. Look for that game in Madison.
Look for the game in Madison in Week 6 when Du-Pec has to travel all the way down to the St. Louis area. But that's where we have the Northwest Division as far. All right, so that's our preview of the NUIC Northwest Division. Shane, next week we'll start with our Week 1 predictions. We'll be rolling into Week 1 as of next Sunday. So we got a lot to look forward to, a lot of practices left to take in. Obviously, we've only got through the first week, so we've still got 2 more weeks of practices, but our next video coming next week will capture what our predictions are for the Week 1 matchups.
Right. Obviously, exciting time. We're finally getting down to games. Looking ahead a little bit, not to really spoil anything, but you got a couple good matchups. Winslow and West Carroll, and another one on the upside division would be actually Polo and Orangeville. I know we put them on opposite ends of the spectrum, but to me that's a big game because if Orangeville is going to be who we think they are, that's a statement game for the Broncos. So
Definitely.
There's not a whole lot going on in Week 1 per se, but a couple games that could definitely draw some interest.
There are, and you pretty much named them. Amboy Milledgeville, Polo Orangeville, even Dakota Galena is a game because what's Galena going to be? We're talking about 2 years ago being a preseason number 1 to faltering in the first round against Stockton to last year folding over completely and only getting 2 wins. So that's the look that we have on the NUIC Northwest. We already put out the upstate last week. So we look for, like we said, and keep stating, a great year in the NUIC conference. Both sides, we see a lot of improvements upon a lot of teams. We can easily see 8 teams in the playoffs this year, so that's going to be a great thing for everybody. Hopefully we can push for that 9th team. That would be something to see. But we'll see when the time comes. So, as always, root for the NUIC. Having high hopes last year and then seeing basically their ship set sail in Week 4. So to subscribe to our videos, all you need to do is hit the button right below me. That's our subscribe button to our YouTube channel. That way you can be the first to know when we post our videos and do our matchups and predictions.
And also, if you're looking for last week's video on the upstate division of the conference, right here, click. It'll take you right there.